Hello, I'm Joe Walensky, Program Manager for ConveyUX, the conference that we have coming up in Seattle, our third annual event coming up in Seattle in January. And I'm speaking with the presenters who will be at the event. And right now I am meeting with Jennifer Romano Bergstrom. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello.
Where are you speaking to us from today?
I'm talking to you from Washington, D.C.
All right, well, I am in Seattle. Well, thanks for being part of the event. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, the types of things that you're involved in?
Sure. My formal training, my background is in experimental psychology. I have a master's and PhD in experimental psych, and I actually kind of stumbled upon user experience and usability testing when I did a internship and postdoc at the U.S. Census Bureau when they had an opening in their usability lab, and they were doing eye tracking, and I thought that sounds really cool. Had no idea what usability even was. But they were interested in my background in experimental psychology and running studies, with humans, even though they weren't usability testing. And one thing just kind of led to another. I ended up in the usability lab, fell in love with it, and just ended up on this completely different path. Really loving eye tracking and other usability methodologies, and continuously learning and aiming to improve some of the methodologies that we use, in our everyday practice. So I spent a few years there, and then I ended up at Forres Marsh Group, where I currently am in Arlington, Virginia, just outside of DC, where I started a usability lab. And here we do a lot of survey related work. So usability testing of surveys, cognitive testing of surveys as well. We also we do a lot of eye tracking. It's been fun getting into eye tracking on paper because of the work that we do with surveys, and a lot of surveys are still conducted on paper. So that's been fun for me to learn and grow. Learning how to do eye tracking on paper and learning what some of those constraints are. Um,
I know you teach a lot, and I'm sure you're always exploring new areas of interest. Are there any hot new interest areas, new design thoughts, or technologies that you're working with?
Sure. Yeah, I love to teach. Teaching for me, in addition to what I do, in my daily practice, it makes me stay on top of all of the current materials. I want to be teaching the new stuff, so I'm always updating my materials, updating my slides, and the information that I'm sharing with students. Eye tracking, for example, there's new eye trackers all the time. The technology is just getting better. More portable, less expensive, so I'm always introducing that to folks, and of course talking about the pros and cons, when to use it, when not to use it. But I really do love that, what I call implicit measure, because oftentimes you can ask people if they looked at something, and they can't accurately tell you, how long it took them to look at something, or how many times they looked at something. And that measure can really give us an indication of whether or not something is confusing. And sometimes people won't tell you. Um, we find, especially with older adults, that oftentimes they'll take the blame for a bad interface. They'll say, this is a beautiful website, but I'm just not very good with computers. And having something like eye tracking, or these implicit measures, really gives us insight into the user experience, sometimes in ways that people can't describe. One of the newest methods that we've used here at Forres Marsh Group that I'm really interested in, it's still pretty new for us, and really in the field, many people aren't using. At this point in time, we're using electrodermal activity, or galvanic skin response. So we have a couple devices, one where people have a device right on their fingertip, another one where it's a little wristband. And while people are interacting with an interface, we can actually see changes in their galvanic skin response, which shows us excitement. Of course, we don't know if that's good excitement or bad excitement. They might have some excitement because they're extremely frustrated, or because they really like something. So we want to make sure we're coupling it with some of these other measures, the more typical behavioral measures and self-report measures. But that's been really fun. It's been fun to get into a new method, to see how it's valuable, if it's even valuable, because it's so new. While I appreciate the new technologies, I also am not just completely enamored, you know, like
Sure.
we have to make sure we're finding the right use for them. And they're not always good to use, you know, just depending on the study and the research aims.
Yeah, it takes a while to build the best practices to be able to use ourselves and then share with others.
Yeah,
Well,
for
at the conference, you're going to be sharing some ideas related to your work. Title of your topic is Unbiased Methods to Understand the User Experience. So, without getting into the details of that, what kind of work, what's the theme of the topic, and how'd you come about to decide to put this session together?
sure. Well, as I mentioned, my background's in experimental psychology, and you know, in experimental psychology, when we're conducting a study, we want to reduce all the confounds, all these extraneous variables, as much as possible, so that when we have a finding, we can accurately say that this is a real finding. It doesn't exist because of these extraneous factors. And through the years, I've taken those practices and I've applied them to usability testing. I think a lot of practitioners introduce a lot of bias without realizing it. You know, asking things like leading questions or behaving differently with one participant over another participant, which can affect the results. You know, asking satisfaction questions with way too many response points. So, you know, my background in experimental psychology, coupled with my survey research between the Census Bureau and what I've done here at Forest Marsh Group, those two together have given me, I think, a different view on how to conduct usability testing to ensure that the data you're getting is actually representative of what's going on with an interface. It's not due to some other extraneous variables. So that's what I'll be talking about at the conference. I think it's really interesting. I hope others are interested as well. I think that it's our duty as practitioners to really be taking pride in conducting really good research, you know, so we can go out there to our clients. So clients and others perceive usability as a science. I view it as a science. You know, we can be methodological and have results that are sound as opposed to just as opposed to maybe some more qualitative research, you know, which again, depending on the research questions, that is totally fine to have more qualitative research. But I still think the way that we ask questions and the biases that we bring to usability testing can really affect our reportings of you know, what we're seeing and what's going on adversely. So
Well, yeah, this topic is definitely one that a lot of people at the conference will be interested in. So it'll be good to see you in a few weeks in Seattle.
thank you. You too. I'm
All
really
right.
excited about this. I'll see
Thanks,
you there.
Jennifer.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.